Today we talk to Jake Pressure, a 28-year-old designer recognized as one of the original creatives to bring streetwear and apparel design into the gaming community. We'll talk about his humble beginnings and how it's led to him working for some of the biggest brands in the world. Today we are interviewing Jake, aka Pressure, aka 1800XO. He's a creative whose roots in gaming and streetwear have led him to working for some of the biggest brands in the world, both inside and outside of gaming. The first question that I always ask everyone that I interview is, where did you start? When did you start? And why did you start?
So I think I first downloaded Photoshop a little over a decade ago. And I'd always want to make t-shirts. That was my shtick. I wanted to create a skate brand and sell t-shirts with my friends, but I never knew how. So I started just making fake tour passes and fake food coupons to go to shows and festivals and stuff. I got a community college class on the basics of Photoshop. It was a 2-month class. I did the 2 months. I got my certificate in Adobe, and then I left. I was like, all right, I know how to use the program. I'm out.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
And then I kind of joined the Twitter space and found the Call of Duty community, and I was like, wow, I really suck at designing.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that, yeah. 100%.
I was like, wow.
Really humbles you.
Yeah, I was I'm really out of my depth. Going into it, I'm like, I know my way around, but then you join the COD design community in the early days, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm really don't know what I'm doing. Which was cool because then it makes it a challenge, right? To get better and make the people that follow you back and appreciate your work.
One of the things that I think is the coolest with the gaming scene, specifically with design, is just the fact that everything's kind of done through social media, right? You're not in an office. Most of the time your job is just through Twitter. And I guess one thing that I wanted to talk about with you in regards to that is you and I think we can both agree that there's a pretty big connection between gaming and street culture, just mainly due to the demographic and a lot of stuff being on social media. So I wanted to ask you personally, how did starting in gaming and that community influence your career now?
Trying to advance in gaming and design, you're always trying to fill voids that don't currently exist in gaming. And that was the one thing that I wanted to do, is bring nicer apparel to gaming and make it more wearable and not just super cringy, super merchy.
Right.
And actually give it a base for it to be something better.
That makes a lot of sense too, because if you look at gaming apparel or merch before street culture and streetwear kind of injected itself into the community, it looks so what you would expect from a gaming, if you've seen gaming esports t-shirts at Walmart, that kind of style, and it's techie, it looks like a microchip, and they got laser beams and stuff everywhere, I appreciate that on your end for trying to push just more visual, just better design and a stronger culture into the community, because it was definitely lacking in that area just because it was so new.
I think now that influencers and teams are taking the approach of actually theming their stuff and having drops and limited runs and capsules, it's very sick to see.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the next question too, is I know that you played a big role in doing that earlier on, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about you and your friend group specifically. So where you work now, 44 Castles, also I think previously with Misfits, it was kind of a similar group, right? You have this really tightly knit friend group who all, I think, have paid some type of influence in street culture with gaming and just in general. So how did you meet these people? Maybe who are they, and how have they influenced your life or just your career in general as a creative?
44 Castles is myself, Jesper, Rish, Caesar, Impact, Sam, Duan Type, Frank, AVO, Zach Harris, Smith, who most people know, and Neil. I actually met Rish in person at MLG Anaheim, I think 2019. Kind of approached me with this idea of 44 and everything, and at the time I was working a full-time design job that I kind of hated. So yeah, that's pretty much when everything started. We just kept working and building and building, and now we're at a point where like we've kind of like built this machine, and now we're just like maintaining it and trying to push it as far as we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if you haven't heard of those names, I mean, these are all kind of legends in the space. I kind of see the 44 Castles team as like the Avengers of the gaming community when it comes to what you guys do. Like, these guys all have massive resumes and like work that they've done for people, you know? So it's really cool seeing everyone come together and like build like what you guys have right now, which is really, really successful. One thing I wanted to ask, maybe to expand on that a little bit, is what does your design process look like for maybe just like a client with 44 Castles, or just in general, maybe for apparel? Like, from start to finish, what do you kind of do?
I mean, I have a bad habit of just like overworking myself. So once I get a project, I kind of just like headstrong it and just work my ass off to make sure that it just comes together quickly, even though it doesn't necessarily have to, but I'd rather not stress on it, and I just work to like overcome that. But yeah, so it's just like mood boarding, getting concepts to them, relaying them to clients, getting feedback, making adjustments. I think the hardest part is about designing apparel for clients is like you'll have this thought of what your vision could be for their brand or their idea, but you'll have to like knock it down a bit to like be more brand friendly. And then so oftentimes like the ideas you think are the sickest often kind of get passed.
Oh yeah,
it's definitely a challenge to like overcome, like to see their vision more than your own.
Yeah, I think anyone with experience in just any streetwear, so like I had my kind of short like my small business with Dang, and it was the exact same thing. So like my thoughts aligning with the owner Brian, his thoughts for like streetwear and the company in general is like I would focus heavily on the design, and he was focused heavily on like the brand and the culture of the brand. So I would pitch so many ideas. I would say like out of like every 10 things that I pitched for maybe like a design or like a look, usually like 1 or 2 would get passed, you know, just because it takes time. I think it took us like around 3 years before our visions were like finally connected, and I could just say like, here's what we're doing, and he's like, okay, cool, let's run it. Leading into what I wanted to ask you next, and maybe this makes it easier, so what advice can you give to people who are practicing apparel design or people that are maybe just starting out?
I would say that there's no real failures. Like let's say you get a big client and you pitch a board of concepts to them, and they don't hit, they don't like any of them. I would just say try not to take that to heart, just because like I said, it's hard to like overcome your vision and actually go to them. So just make sure that you don't take it as an L, and don't be hard on yourself, you know? Like it's not a failure, it's just like you acquiring, like you getting closer to their vision. And don't be afraid to fail, because I mean, it's only going to help you grow.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a classic saying, and it's so true to apparel design in general, because you're working with a business that is usually a startup. Like there's so many apparel businesses, you know, and if your stuff is getting like denied over and over again, in my eyes, I used to get like really upset about that. And then thinking about it, it just means that that person cares about their brand so much that they need it to be perfect, you know? And it's nothing against you or your work, it's what they need for their brand. And they're just trying to like hit that mark. Usually if it's a startup, sometimes they don't even know what that mark is or like what they want their brand to look like. So it goes off of feeling, and that can be kind of where there's that gray area of like the frustrations, you know, of just going back and forth, sending something off, they don't like it, but they're not sure why, and just like you keep going, right? Like you said, you just keep moving, you grow from it, and you do grow from it, right? So yeah,
and I feel like that gray area is forever growing, just because like, granted, like streetwear and culture has been like embedded in this like forever, but now people want to take their brand into like a new direction that they haven't before. And so not only are you trying to make something for a brand, but you're trying to make something for a brand in an aspect that doesn't currently exist.
Right.
So their direction might not, one, make sense, or they might not know what direction they want because they haven't done it before, like doing capsules and doing like drops and like how that actually works, aside from just like a merch store that's like logos and stuff placed on garments.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a whole new territory for most people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think experience and maybe what you excel in is like, with how many clients you've had, you can like help guide people that are maybe starting a streetwear business. Instead of just like making cool stuff for them,
Yeah.
you can also tell them like give them ideas basically, you know, and like help them see the vision of their brand. That's kind of where like the true expertise is in not just streetwear design, but just everything for design, right? Is when you can like guide your client instead of like work for them. I wanted to pivot a little bit. This is my favorite question that I have lined up for you. So, because I don't know, but I wanted to ask you, and maybe you could walk us through your first big breakthrough moment in your career and what it took for you to get there.
I'd say honestly, my big first breakthrough was 44 Castles.
Why is
just
that?
Just because that launched like a whole like avenue of career wise that like I never really thought was possible. Like I did design on Twitter and stuff for fun, and then I had like my design job, which was okay, but I didn't like it at all. But I never really thought of myself as being a designer as like my career. It was kind of just like a fun thing that I did like with my friends online. So when 44 Castle happened, it kind of like transitioned my life into something that I didn't really think was possible. Like I was just like doing what I enjoyed to do, which is making apparel with my friends for people of influence and like kind of like changing like the foundation of what like merchandising is in the gaming scene. And that was sick. It was a real like surreal moment. Cause like since then I've like moved out of LA. I've just been able to do a lot of stuff since then. I appreciate those guys a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that separates your team with like the other teams out there is how many unique ideas you all have. So like on social media, they just make really interesting ideas and content. So leading into the next question, I wanted to ask you, so in an area of design with like streetwear or street culture, it can get repetitive really quickly. Like we see a lot of like, it's very oversaturated with kind of a lot of the same content. So how do you make sure that you stand out in an area of design that can look that oversaturated?
See, that's hard.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna pull from inspiration from like everything you see, right? Like scrolling Instagram, you'll see like a composition you like and you want to attribute it to something. And honestly, I would just say not thinking too deep of it. Like I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but like try to let it be organic. Don't pull so much. Don't like follow like, I know a lot of like apparel trends on Twitter, like Threshold and very like gritty designs. Just don't fall victim to like only doing one thing. As far as trying things, like if you see something on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, honestly, don't copy. I mean, don't full on copy it, but copy it and learn how they did it. Don't post it or whatever, but just keep it in your arsenal that you now know how to do that. And then kind of like mix styles. I
think too, your work is kind of speaks about that practice, because like as you were talking about, variety and trying out new things, like I was just kind of looking at the slideshow that's playing off to my right, and like right now that's a Hot Wheels design packaging, you know. And it's just like stuff like that to me when I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see a bunch of like you said, like t-shirt with kind of the same design where it's like all that detail and like the like threshold kind of look, the ink bleeding, you know, that type of stuff. You scroll through it pretty fast and then you see like a Hot Wheels design packaging, like, and that it's just interesting. Like it makes it unique. And that's one of my favorite things about streetwear that I've seen recently is when brands create just really unique products that a lot of people, and it was the same for Dang, and why I appreciate Brian so much is because he taught me that too, is to just say like, he had almost every single day. He was like, "What if we did this?" And it was like, there was a brand called Carrots that I'm sure you know about, Anwar Carrots. But I remember on their website they do clothing, and then just one time they had like a mini screen printing kit, and you could like screen print your own shirt, and they would just send you a package like with all the stuff you would need for it, so you could do it at home.
That's sick.
And like, you're not gonna find that at like a retail store like Macy's or something. Like, they're just not gonna offer those types of kind of unique concepts.
And I will say the one thing with apparel design is it becomes very daunting, like if that's all you do. So like a big thing that I've learned is like anything you do, whether it be like a poster design, cover art, illustrations, or whatever, like all of those avenues can be attributed to apparel design. I would just say like mix that in. As most like different types of graphic design, because they can all be attributed to apparel, and what you learn on those projects can also help you learn apparel more.
I wanted to pivot just a little bit and ask you, just because I'm curious, have you seen, like, is there been any product that a streetwear or fashion brand has released that stood out to you?
I think the best people doing stuff like that right now are like Blazzies and Market, who used to be Chinatown Market. When they were first coming up, they did a bunch of t-shirts with like washable markers and a bunch of like interactive apparel designs, like word searches and crosswords. And I thought that was really sick. And Blazzy is always doing like some pretty crazy, unique stuff, like whether it be just normal merch or like he's been making a lot of like physical figures. And I feel like that all just helps the environment a lot.
Yeah.
It makes it less like one direction.
To me, like for streetwear brands, I think the reason why there's what we would call like culture in those brands is because products like those can create like a sense of community, right? Because like you said, it's interactive with the people buying them. Like you can feel a connection to the clothes that you wear instead of just like wearing it. You know, instead of it just being the garment yourself, you're like you're connected to the brand.
That's why I love accessories so much. Just because I feel they help bring like a collection to life. They give like more of a foundation to the garment designs.
Is there an accessory you've designed before that you thought was really cool?
There is. I just can't talk about it yet.
Not like a little like just object, or is it like very specific?
Honestly, I really like keychains.
Keychains.
And yeah, nothing in particular yet, but there's definitely some cool stuff coming out that I think people will like.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I can like feel you sweating through the screen.
But I definitely want to make like more physical like novelty items. I feel like those are really sick.
Also tote bags. I know tote bags are kind of basic, but I love tote bag designs so
anyone in 44 will tell you I'm obsessed with tote bags.
Yeah,
almost every collection I do, I will try to throw in a tote bag.
Gotta do it. It's just the canvas, the texture, like it's just a perfect blank slate.
They're sick.
Yeah, getting back on track, and I think this is the last question I have lined up, is just what would you consider the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to apparel design? And maybe how do they fix that?
I'll just say falling victim to like one style or like one niche. I mean, granted, you don't want to be the person with like 100 styles that doesn't have their own, but also I think it's important to have a skill base to where you can, like if somebody hits you with a client brief, you don't necessarily have to pass on it because it's not the style you do. So I would just say don't fall victim to one style and keep trying new things. And I think a lot of like the people, at least in the Twitter space, are really young. And it's like the perfect time to just like keep trying new things. I know it's hard when like things trend on Twitter, like certain styles and stuff, but
you're talking about trends. What are some trends that you're seeing now? And then maybe trends that you're seeing are not being done, or maybe like do a little prediction for us. What are you seeing in this space?
I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot more brands wanting to be, and more people focus on like application instead of just like screen print. It's going to be like a lot more like cut and sew, a lot more like puff print, like crazy, like black lighting. Yeah. Which is why I say like people need to get on their range, because streetwear and like apparel culture is forever changing. And if you're not really changing with it, then you're just going to get left.
Yeah. Hey, that's like, if I were to give any advice for streetwear design, just based on my like minor observations and experience, is like just trying new things, not just with, like you said, screen printing, but there's so much you can do outside of Photoshop and outside of Illustrator that you can do physically that will make products so much more interesting, you know? Like, that's why Fear of God became one of my favorite brands in kind of streetwear, is because they have that really iconic like rubber stamp, you know, for their essentials.
Yeah.
That's not something you can really like see when you're just hyper focused on everything being digital. So you got to explore those physical applications like puff print. We did that for the last 100 Thieves drop, but like it changes how it will look on a screen versus when you actually feel it in your hand and you can feel the ink kind of just, you know, bleeding or puffing up, you know?
Yeah. And I think having that in mind for the process of your design is like really helpful, because essentially, like, to the basic consumer, you just want to make the garment as most worth it as you can, right? So like puff print, embroidery, it all adds a level of like, okay, this is actually worth something. Like, you're actually getting something that people put work in, where like screens is fine, but if you can make your pieces more valuable, then...
And maybe not even just like valuable as far as like how expensive it is to make, but it just makes it feel valuable to the consumer, because it feels different, and it feels like a garment they can have in their closet, and it's like different from every single piece they own. Yeah. Those are all the questions I had lined up for you. Is there anyone you'd like to shout out, or anything you'd like to shout out before we move into the Q&A?
I think I've already shouted out everyone.
Yeah. 44 Castle Gang.
Yep. Revolt, all the boys.
Yeah, we're going to move into a live Q&A for YouTube. If you'd like to tune into the next interview or listen to the Q&A afterwards, the VOD's going to be up on my Twitch channel at Nowack Design. So if you're on YouTube, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. I might throw this one into YouTube because I think that's a really good question. ID is asking, where do you find your mockups and textures? And maybe just beyond that, like, where do you find most of your resources that you use for design?
Honestly, just hunting. As of late, I kind of don't use as many mockups. I kind of just like make them from base garments I like, because I feel like mockups just put you in a box almost. There's only like so many t-shirt mockups and so many hoodie mockups, and then you'll see a garment from like Palace or Supreme or any of those big brands, and you'll be like, I want that. Like, I want to design on that, but obviously the mockup doesn't exist. So I would just clone stamp it, use the base garment, make a mock out of it, change the colors, and that, I feel like learning that will be huge to like somebody's arsenal.
Yeah, kind of like just customizing it, right?
Yeah, then you're not just limited. I know Doron has some dope mockups. There's some sick ones on Creative Market.
I also might put this one in the YouTube video, but Winner is asking, how would you go about working with a distributor to get shirts or products? How would you start or reach out?
I've told a few people this, but honestly, I mean, depending where you live, but find a local one. Like, go on Yelp or like Google and find like a local screen printer and try to work with them and see what they can and can't do, who supplies like their garments and stuff, just because you can build like an actual personal relationship with them, as opposed to like filling in an online form, selecting what garments you want, because then it's just, you're never going to build a relationship, and you're always going to pay like top dollar. If you build that relationship, they'll help you out, you know.
And you can physically see, like, you don't have to like keep shipping stuff back and forth.
Yeah,
you
can be there for the process, not just like the end result.
Yeah, so that's big. Yeah, definitely local is the way to go. Hopefully that helps.